Hello. Across this week and next, we will be discussing how the brain processes reading information. To help you make sense of this information, in this lecture, I will talk about some of the basic brain structures and processes. Dr. Touan is a renowned French researcher studying the brain. He is the director of NeuroSpin Brain Imaging Center in France and professor of experimental cognitive psychology at the Collège de France. Later this week, you will watch a lecture of his. His book, Reading in the Brain, is an important book in reading science. And in 2019, he wrote a book, How We Learn, Why Brains Learn Better Than Any Machine, for now. If you want to go deeper on this topic, I highly recommend these two books. Dr. Touan reminds us that it's simply not true that there are hundreds of ways to learn to read. When it comes to reading, we all have roughly the same brain that imposes the same constraints and the same learning sequence. For this reason, I would like to start off by reviewing some key parts and features of the human brain. Basic knowledge of the brain is often assumed when engaging in this topic of the reading brain, so I thought a brief review might be helpful. The brain is the most complex organ in the human body, coordinating all of the human body's functions. It is a 3-pound mass of fat and protein. It is made up of 4 main regions that each control particular tasks and also work together to make sure the human body is healthy and operational. The brain stem connects the brain to the spinal cord and controls a number of vital functions. It controls cardiac activity, respiration, digestion, and sleep. It consists of the pons, a mass of nerve fibers that carries sensory information, the midbrain, which helps control movement and audio and visual processing, the medulla oblongata, which creates motor sensory pathways between the brain and the spinal cord. The cerebellum is responsible for coordinating muscle movements, and the diencephalon makes up the core of the brain. The diencephalon consists of 3 important structures. The thalamus, which transmits information from all senses except smell, and the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus that work together to produce and regulate chemicals, hormones, that govern sensation, instinctual behaviors, weight regulation, and energy. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, making up 3/4 of the brain's volume. It controls higher functions, learning, reasoning, speech, and sense of sight and hearing. The cerebrum is full of grooves and ridges running in every direction. These are called sulci, grooves, and gyri, the ridges. Their role is to increase the surface area and hence the number of neurons within the cerebrum. This permits larger processing and cognitive abilities within the cerebral hemispheres. The cerebrum consists of 2 hemispheres, the right and the left, with the corpus callosum connecting the 2 hemispheres. The corpus callosum is a broad band of tissue made up of the tails or axons of nerve cells that busily carry messages from one hemisphere to the other. The brain consists of 2 mirror image sides or hemispheres that work together. The left hemisphere processes information sequentially and is described as analytical. It is most efficient at processing verbal information. As Seidenberg warns, thinking about left versus right brain activity is an oversimplification of the brain, but can be helpful in general understanding. Both hemispheres are involved in reading, but the majority of activity is seen in the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere is most efficient at visual and spatial processing and is thought that nonverbal stimuli are processed primarily in the right hemisphere. Research into the operation of the right and left hemispheres shows that effective processing of information requires access to both as they complement each other. Each of the cerebral hemispheres are divided into 4 lobes, which are named after the bones of the skull that surround them: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. The frontal lobe is the largest and least understood, beginning at the front of the brain and reaching back to the central sulcus. The area between the central and precentral sulci helps control body movements and is called the motor area, while the remainder of the frontal lobe modulates various aspects of thinking, feeling, imagining, and making decisions. The frontal lobe contains the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher order thinking, and Broca's area, which is essential for language production. We will talk about this more in the next lecture. The brain's parietal lobe is located immediately behind the frontal lobe. It is involved in processing information from the body's senses. The parietal lobe also modulates such activities as spatial orientation. The brain's temporal lobe is on the side of the head. Temporal means near the temples, and is associated with auditory information and controls memory and language. The main area responsible for processing auditory information is located within the temporal lobe. Wernicke's area is located in the temporal lobe and is important for speech comprehension. The occipital lobe is located in the back of the brain. It is responsible for vision and interpreting visual information. The brain is made up of billions of neurons, nerve cells, that communicate with each other to form neural pathways or neural networks. This is how learning occurs. The neuron, cells of the brain, is made up of a number of different parts: the cell body, dendrites, which receive messages from other cells, and the axon, or tail, which passes messages from the cell body to other neurons, muscles, or glands. The axon is covered in a myelin sheath. The myelin sheath protects the signal sent by the cell body and allows the signal to go faster. Nerve cells communicate with each other to form neural pathways or neural networks. Learning. Humans create new neural connections throughout life. Cells can regenerate themselves and are plastic. This is how reading occurs. There is no one area where reading happens in the brain. It is by the creation of neural pathways that connects different regions of the brain. Explicit, systematic instruction builds strong, direct neural pathways in the brain, building neural connections that are automatic. This takes lots of repetition, like wearing down a path and across a field, back and forth, over and over again, learning and creating memories, building new neural pathways. If there is vague instruction with little repetition, a strong pathway is not built, and learning is impeded.